This is my rainwater tank here in San Diego. I caught it during a summer storm and we got a little bit of water through it. And I got to wondering, how much is in there? You can listen, but listening doesn't really work. So I got a Dragino LDDS 75 liquid distance measuring sensor and put it in there. It runs on the Helium network, but you can't see what it does until you build a dashboard. So that's what I did. And that's what I wanted you to be able to do with this tutorial series, is make sure that you can build your own dashboard so you can see what is happening in your tank or with any sensor. Here we go. Hey, I'm Nick Hawks with MetSci Scientific, going through part 1 of the Build a Custom Dashboard series over on the MetSci Scientific site. This first part is for those folks who have basically never touched a Raspberry Pi before, who've never written an SD card. All those things are going to be super new to them. Maybe you've plugged in an Ethernet cable once or twice, but that's it. So this part was recorded for you to make sure that anybody who is able at least to gather the materials can go through and do pretty much everything. I think the only part I skipped was plugging an Ethernet cable into your router. Everything else is in here, including a full list of all the hardware, what it is, what it does, all of that stuff in there. This custom dashboard tutorial was designed for newbies. So for a lot of you who are super advanced, you may want to skip ahead to the next video in the series, which goes through the Cloudflare tunnels, a little bit more advanced. If this is brand new stuff to you, that's fine. Follow along. I'll hold your hand through the whole thing. When we get to the Cloudflare tunnels, you will be ready to go for them. All right, rock and roll. Let's get into this. First thing I'm going to do is always put my glasses on so I can see what the heck is going on. Cruise over to the MetSci Scientific site. This is the walkthrough of the tutorial, so you can read all the stuff that I'm talking about here. We'll talk about the hardware that you need briefly here. Here is what you're going to need for this project. We'll start off with a Raspberry Pi 4. You'll need one of these guys, a SD card for the Pi, an external SSD to store all of the IoT data that's going to be coming in. You'll need a USB to TTL adapter. I'm going to use the Bus Pirate V5. You can use V6 if you can get it. Either one is fine. You'll need a couple of USB to AC cables. I kind of assume everyone has those, but just in case. You'll also need, of course, a sensor. This is the LDDS 75 from Dragino. I've got the top off right now so we can see inside of it. And you'll need DuPont wires. You get these from Amazon, and you use these to connect from the Bus Pirate into the sensor so that we can make some configuration adjustments as we're going through this thing. The last thing that you might need, it's totally optional, is this flirt case. I'm going to be putting this Raspberry Pi in a place where my wife sees it, and so I got to make sure it doesn't look like a total janky project. And so this Raspberry Pi goes into the case, and then it will mount on the on a little wall, and what she'll see will be something, whoops, something like this. So it'll look super nice versus just being a Raspberry Pi kind of out in the open. The flirt is totally optional. You don't need the thing. It just makes everything look a little bit nicer. And that is everything that you need to do this project. And then let's talk a little bit on the setup stuff. Now, for some of you, setting up a Raspberry Pi is pretty darn basic. For others, it's something they haven't done before. So let's talk a little bit about what this looks like here. We'll cruise over to what I've got on my desk, which is the Raspberry Pi. It's inside here. Talked about this. Got my little SD card, the portable SSD, and the little cable. What I'm going to do is take my SSD and I'm going to put it into my little box here. So we've got it there. And then I'm going to flash this thing. So I'm going to open up Raspberry Pi Imager. And I'll go to Raspberry Pi 4. That's the device we're going to use. I'm going to choose my OS. We'll go down to Raspberry Pi OS Other. I'm going to choose the OS Lite 64-bit. We'll choose the storage. We've got that 32 gigabit in there. It'll say 31. The next thing that I'm going to do is hit the next button. I'm going to edit the settings, and I'll put in all of the stuff that I'm using. So for me, I'm going to use MetSci Local Demo. I'm going to go ahead and hit my massively secret password, which I keep on a separate note. So I will paste that sucker in, and that goes here. And then I'm going to not worry about the rest of these. I don't need to be on Wi-Fi. I don't want that thing happening. I don't need anything in services. Just leave it as is. Go back to general. I'll hit save. It's going to ask me if I want to apply the settings. I'll say yes. It'll ask me, do I want to pre-fill the Wi-Fi password? No, I'm not going to put this thing on Wi-Fi. It'll erase everything. Is that cool? Yeah, that's cool with me. So it will ask me off screen to put in my password for the computer. to allow me to write to this card. I'll put it in and we'll start writing this thing. Okay, the SD card is now written, so you can remove it from the reader. I'm going to go ahead and pull that sucker out. I'll hit continue. Don't need to worry about it too much. And then I'm going to put this thing into the Pi. And that will be good to go. I'm also, at this time, I'm just going to connect up my external hard drive just because that's pretty darn easy for me. And now all I've got to do is plug in the Raspberry Pi to my Ethernet into my local network, and I'm good to go. So that's the haps there. That's how the whole thing works. Okay, just to put a bow on this thing, I'm going to put the Raspberry Pi in this little 3D case that I've printed. I'm back in my laundry room now, so this is what Lee will end up seeing. I've got some Ethernet cable run out here. I'm going to put that into the Pi on the side here. So now it's got connectivity, and then kind of tuck all this stuff up so it doesn't get too out of the way. The last step is I've got power on the wall over here, and I will run the little USB-C cable up into the Pi, and the Pi now has power. So that is that thing ready to go. Now I just got to put the cabinet back. Okay, it can live on the side just like that. Nobody needs to know. Okay, with the Pi setup, it's set up in the laundry room, we're going to do a little bit more of final kind of the nerd setup on the Pi, and for that I'm going to open up Terminal. So we'll get this sucker open, and then I'm going to SSH into it. So SSH, and then for me I use demo 192.168.101.2. Now your credentials maybe hopefully are different than mine. You can use whatever you want. And I'll hit enter. It'll ask me if I'm cool with this. I say yes. And then it wants a password. I'm going to put in my password here. Top secret. And there we go. We're into demo at MetSci. This is a fresh Pi to now use. So we'll go back into our tutorial here. And the first thing you do with almost every Pi, almost every time, is copy the sudo apt update, etc., etc. And we're going to paste that into the Pi and let that sucker run. Okay, we're all finished up with the initial install. I'm going to go back to the tutorial, and in securing the Pi, I'm going to copy this curl command. So this guy right here, I'll just hit the little copy button on the right. I will go back into my terminal, and I'm going to go ahead and paste that in and hit enter. This thing will run to the end, and then we will reboot it, and then we'll go on to the next one. Okay, with the security script install complete, it'll say to reboot. I'm going to hit Y, and it will reboot that sucker. We will then cruise back into the, we'll let this thing kind of think about it, what it's doing for a while. As it reboots, as the Pi reboots, and we'll go down to this install services piece, and we'll go ahead and copy. This is our next script that we're going to put in when we go back into the Pi. So if we go back into terminal, usually it takes a minute or two for the Pi to come back up. Okay, so in the Pi, now that we're done with that, or we've had the Pi, rebooted, I'm just going to hit the up button to SSH back in. It will ask me for my password again. I'm copying that from off screen, and I'll put it in here, paste that sucker in, and hit enter. We should be back in here. So now we're going to go down to that command that we just had, which is our service install script. I will copy that. I'll go back into terminal and paste that sucker in. This is the dashboard v3 script, and hit enter. Now this will ask you a couple questions as you go through. It will give you the warning that we have less than 4 gigabytes of RAM detected. This is fine for most people. If you're running a ton of sensors and they're all firing every 30 seconds, fine, get an 8 gig Pi, but for most people, 4 is fine. Go ahead and hit yes. It'll run through a bunch of the prerequisites that you need. One of the things it'll do, I think this is funny, you may think it's a little bit silly, is that it will make up a bunch of usernames from various sci-fi, fiction, fantasy novels that I have read and enjoyed, or series I've read and enjoyed watching. So you can keep those or discard them or whatever. The first thing it'll ask you is this, which is, do you want to keep the organization name? Default is Medio Scientific. That is my organization name, so I'm going to keep it, but you can change it if you want. I'm going to hit Y. And then these are the funny names. So Tank from, well, I'll let you guys figure it out. Ewok and Muad'Dib. I'm going to hit yes to all of those, and it will go through the rest of the install process. I'll skip that part for you here, but come back when it's finished. Okay, when it finishes up, you're going to have all of your credentials right here. So what I do is I just copy this sucker, and then I go ahead and paste it into a note somewhere else that may not be following the best security practices out there, but it's pretty darn easy. And for each of these services that we just stood up, Node-RED right here, and InfluxDB and Grafana, we have a set of credentials that we're going to use later. Make sure that you copy all of this stuff down. Just copy it all at once. If you want to use the installation log, you can. Or if you want to view the installation log, you can. I'm not going to worry about it right now. What you should do is once you've copied all those files down, you should delete it. You can do that with an RMRF. I'm just not going to worry about that for right now. I'm going to hit Y, and now we are done. So now this thing is installed and we're ready to go. Now you may have seen that we have a couple new services to check out. So let's go check those out. And now we're in the Node-RED piece. So my Node-RED username is Tank from, of course, the Matrix. And then my password is some reasonably complicated thing. All this stuff is just local on your Pi. So for right now, don't worry too much about it. And I'm going to hit login. This will set me up with Node-RED. So now, cool, I know that I'm logged into Node-RED. I'm going to open up another tab at the top of my window. And what I do each time I do this is I open up all three of these and just make sure that all the credentials are right, that everything's working, that we are good to go. This is, of course, Ewok. I'll let you figure out what series that's from. I'll put in my password over here and paste it in, and I'll sign into InfluxDB. So cool. We're looking at InfluxDB. Great, that is working. And then our last one to check is Grafana, which is running on the Pi's port, Pi port 3000. So I'm pasting. And then these are all coming from my credentials file that I copied down and kept somewhere super safe. I'm going to go to sign in up at the top right. The username for me is going to be Muad'Dib, good old Paul from the Dune series. And for the record, like many of us, I read the book long before I saw the movie. Book, as usual, much better. So now this thing is logged in. So now we know that we are logged in and we've got all three of these services running. We've got Node-RED, our InfluxDB, and our Grafana. We'll go back to our dashboard, and we've done the service install script. All that stuff running. We checked all of these different pieces. Here is the credential, here's the command that you can use to delete your file. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to integrate our external SSD. So we're going to cruise back to the Pi. So we're in the Pi, and we're going to use this lsblk command, which is right there. And that lists all of the stuff that's attached to our Pi. So there's our SDA1 for me. That's what I'm seeing. You're probably seeing something pretty similar. And what we're going to do is we're going to mount the SSD to this location. So I'm going to use these commands here. Now I'm using these two commands here. This second one may be slightly different for you. The SDA1 piece here may not be what you're going to use. But back in my terminal, I'm going to do the first command, which is the sudo make-dir, which is make directory. We're going to make this thing, and then the next thing is we will mount it. And the magic generally works. Hit enter, and now we've got this thing. You can set the ownership for your user. Now, when I first wrote this thing, I think the users I had were core. I've changed it to demo. So whatever user you named, hit user. So in my case, demo:demo, and hit enter. And then we're going to cruise into the fstab. So I'm going to copy that guy right here. And back in terminal, I'm going to open this thing up. and we'll see we actually may not see anything. So down at the bottom, what I'm going to do is cruise. So in these, when you're looking at these files, you can't like just use your mouse to get there. I know for folks who've done this a million times, like, of course not, Nick, but it always gets me. So you have to use the arrow button, and then I'm just going to paste in that bottom one. I'm using this SDA piece because that works for me. On my Mac, I'm going to hit Control X and then Y to say yes to save it, and then write it to that name and hit enter. That is pretty straightforward. So now we've got this thing pretty much set up. We're going to check that it is now set up. So lsblk, same command we did before. And now where before it said just this part here, now we can see, whoops, where it is mounted. So we are good to go there. You can go through and verify these permissions. Everything should work for you. Okay, that concludes part 1 of the MetSci Demo Dashboard tutorial. We are going to jump into Cloudflare Tunnels applications and tokens in the next video. Really excited that you now have a Raspberry Pi 4. It's set up, it's on your local network, you're running Node-RED, you're running InfluxDB, you're running Grafana, you're ready to go. We're going to move you through the next part of the tutorial here. This tutorial was made possible by a generous grant from the Helium Foundation's IoT working group. Really psyched and grateful to them for supporting this and making this thing possible. There have been a ton of hours have been put into this to make all this stuff really easy for you, and so that you can copy and paste your way to a working dashboard. And then from there, hopefully this tutorial enables you to add hundreds or thousands more sensors so that you can do a ton more with the Helium network. All right, rock and roll. Let's keep going.